time. So that's something. Thanks, Ronan. This is from Alex, who says, as a fan of White House Down, which was one of the most enjoyable films I've seen recently, I was compelled to sit after Mark's review stating its similarities. I still went in with absolutely no expectations and came out satisfied. It is awful, mad and far-fetched to say the least, but it passed the 6-laugh test with flying colours. I could have done without the slow first third of the film, but once that was over, the crazy scenes of cities being destroyed were brilliantly rubbish. Thank you, Alex. I could have done with age 14. That was great. And the number one film is Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, so wonderful. It's interesting because the film for me, the second it opened, because Roger Deakins is just, he's the man. He's the man of cinematography.
Cinematography god.
Exactly.
He is.
Exactly. But I think the storyline itself and the narrative and the themes only really came together for me near the final third. And it all just clicked together very suddenly. And at that moment, the film, and it's annoying because it's kind of a big spoiler, so I can't really go into it, but that aspect of the film just hit me in such a wave. And emotionally, I found myself quite overwhelmed. And I did cry by the end of Blade Runner, which I think is possibly quite a rare occasion for a lot of people who watch this film. But yeah, I think thematically, it's beautiful in the way that it ties together with the first film. Absolutely.
Did you? I mean, I really loved it. I mean, I thought it was a work of art. I mean, it felt like you were watching an artist at work. And Denis Villeneuve's films up until now have all been great. I've really enjoyed all of them. And having Hampton Fancher back, who scripted the first Blade Runner, gave it a sense of continuity. And I thought the kind of themes that were explored in the first film about, what is it like to be human, to view that from the outside, I thought was really interesting and kind of extended in this film, which I really like. And also there's a kind of, there's a sequence with Elvis Presley in it. And so I was sold on that anyway. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And I liked the pace of it. I wanted to ask you, though, from a female perspective, what you felt about the way that the women were portrayed.
I personally didn't have a huge problem with it. I absolutely understand what people were saying when they criticized the film, because a lot of the women in the film are very racially dressed, or they're prostitutes, or they're this hologram girlfriend.
A little podcast action there. My favorite, actually, Kermode and Mayo, BBC film reviews. But yeah, today I'm actually working on this is actually for a client, but I don't think I'm giving away too much in this. It's really a scene that I'm just starting to illustrate, and eventually we'll animate little parts of it. That's why the hands are there. But this is a program called Anim VR. I personally am starting to really love it. Lately you've seen me sort of sculpting purely in, like digital clay. But this is a whole different paradigm of working with kind of essentially frame-by-frame animation. And it's in beta format, so it's not even really commercially available. So what you're seeing is, someone like me as a guinea pig using it for production, which is, carries its own risk, but at the same time, I think it's well worth it. So far, I think this is. The developers are doing a great job of addressing issues and sort of coming up with really interesting solutions to things. In my case, I am literally, I can kind of show you some bits. Let's get out of this particular scene. I'll come right back to it. So, quick saves with like a GIF file, which is cool. GIF. I really decided on what's proper terminology. Let's load something. So all these other guys here. Oh, for example, like the birds that I posted, you might have seen at some point. See, it's a very simple scene actually. I did this, and these are 3 actual copied clips that so I did the original bird. I don't know which one of them there are, but you can literally see it, you run through it. So with the left stick, I can actually run through the timeline. This is what the timeline looks like. So the camera here is really cool. camera is kind of how I got a lot of that sense of motion. So if I press the play button, you can actually see, and I'm the one who actually moved through the camera. There are no keyframes like you normally would have in other programs. You are the keyframe, you know. So as you can see, that blue line is actually my physical movement. And in order to sort of avoid shaky cam, it actually smooths it out for you, which is really nice. I imagine in future versions you could probably play with that smoothing even more. Let's see what happens when I take it off. Not so bad. So the way you can look at it on a more objective screen is there's a theatrical sort of view there. There's also a really cool thing, and I haven't used this yet. You can import all sorts of media. You can actually import FBX model files, like actual, OBJ 3D files. It doesn't light very well. I mean, I don't expect this program to do everything for you, even though I wish it would. But the fact that you can bring in 3D models is really cool. But everything in here is native to the program. From the really nice paint strokes, which I'm really happy with. It has a very nice. So, for example, something that I really love about this. So the way I got these sort of painterly effects that animate in space is very cool and very unique to this program. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before. It's called an anim brush. So let's say if I get my effects button up here, effects layer, see? So already it's showing you the onion skinning. So they even have onion skinning, it's a panel just for it. So you can sort of, I guess 3 layers deep, start to play with the opacity of each onion layer. The anim brush, I set it to a 12, I guess, in this particular one. But that basically gives you latitude in terms of how long these sort of animated streams can go. And I think it applies to a number of things. It's not just the paintbrush. I understand that it also can apply to modifying things like nudging, I think even recoloring, which is really cool. I get to try all that stuff out. And again, I'm really still kind of a beginner in this program, but I took to it really quickly. So, for example, let's take this. Let's take a color that you can really see in space. And as this goes, and as I'm on that layer, right here, layer here, I can start. Oops, it's not working. I thought it would. Oh, there it is. It's kind of showing up. I think it's too short though. Let's see what happens. It's really weird how it's coming out. You get the idea though. Moved up. No, I'm curious why that's happening. Yeah, 24 frames per second. Effects are happening here. Yeah, the timeline is still trying to kind of figure out some aspects of the timeline, but there's a lot of looping effects that you can do. You can sort of choose the in and out points of it. So I'm a little puzzled as to why this isn't looking as I thought it would. It is following it though. It's just a little bit staccato-y. You get the idea. Usually it's a lot more flowing like this white brush here. Interesting. Anyhow, so you get the point. I want to go back to working on my other file. Probably put my podcast back on. And listen to very British film reviews. This was my very first one, and this is a good example of me bringing, a model from Oculus Media, which is probably my favorite piece of like 3D modeling software. By the way, I never thought I would say that because I haven't really taken to 3D modeling on a desktop as much. Yeah, so you can see and there's a theater view up there. Again, using the camera in a way to really blend it more engaging motion. Yeah, all of these effects on the bottom here are all done with the Anim brush. So between the camera, the Anim brush, I mean, there's just a lot of. It's a really, really interesting piece of software. I really hope it goes far because it's something special. I think. If you grab out individual pieces, let's try this out. Yeah, it's doing that weird thing. It's odd. I actually kind of have to figure that out because I don't know. I wonder if it's because it's on a straight brush. Maybe that's what it is. Ah, there we go. Duh. See, this thing here is the straight brush. I just have it in a different setting. The Splendor brush is cool. And you know, it'll totally record that. But that's great. You know, for sort of more of a painterly version of like particle effects, essentially. I can make a much bigger font lines. Obviously, I think this is probably quite taxing on the system if I start adding too much. But and you know, it can come dangerously close to being a novelty. So using it in a way that's smart and tasteful is kind of the key. So let me go back to this. This is just my little reference for these guys. So I'm going to go back to listening to my stuff, but thanks for stopping by if you're watching. Where is Music Bee? There you are.
And that is following Ryan Gosling everywhere. But I felt like I could sense just underneath everything their struggle. I could feel them struggling against the situation that they are in. So for me, I wasn't overly pleased by the female characters. I wouldn't say it's a triumph for women in cinema, but I think it didn't bother me so much. It didn't really bother me that much. It just kind of worked just about.
Did you think there was kind of unnecessary boobage?
Yes and no, because there was in a literal sense, but I think in terms of the atmosphere, it worked because you wanted this world that felt like it was suppressive and oppressive to the women, and you wanted to have the women fighting against something, which it is difficult because I absolutely understand what people are saying, and I think it's more the film existing in a context in which every sci-fi has this problem. Sci-fis in which the future is meant to be wonderful has this problem. I think for Blade Runner, it is meant to be an oppressive future. So for me, it worked, but yeah, it's difficult. I can see what people are arguing against here.
I must admit, I mean, from a male perspective, I thought that the representation of a lot of the women, and particularly adverts and all the rest of it, was a sense of the degradation of society as opposed to an exploitative thing. But again, I didn't know whether that was just a male view of it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I agree with you, but yeah.
Well deserved, Blade Runner at number one. So what have we got? Well, we've got coming up. We've got my conversation with Jeff Goldblum. Jeff, how are you?
I'm good, Sanjeev. How are you?
I'm very, very good, thank you. I'm a little bit in awe, if you don't mind me saying.
There's no reason, believe you
No,
me.
there is. If you were looking at it through my eyes, you would be awed at yourself.
Really?
You would.
Well, maybe I would. Yeah. Now that you mention it,
Yeah, try sometime. So, Thor Ragnarok, could you tell us about the film and particularly who the Grandmaster is?
Sure. Well, the Grandmaster, if you've read the comic books over the last few decades or Wikipedia'd him, you find out there's a whole backstory that you may not have seen if you saw the movie. You've seen
I have, yeah.
the movie. Yeah, me too, like a couple of weeks ago. Well, he's one of the elders, so-called, of the universe. He was born shortly after the Big Bang, like 4.6 billion years ago. And he and his brother, the Collector, played by Benicio del Toro in that other movie, have been around, and I'm immortal, and I can fly. I have more superpowers than anybody. But these days, I'm the leader of Sakaar, my pleasure planet there, and colorful planet, and play games. I like to play games and have fun with people and put on these gladiatorial matches. And the movie, stars, as you know, people that really deserve our awe, like Sir Anthony Hopkins, of course, and Kate Blanchett, and Mark Ruffalo, and Idris Elba, and Tessa Thompson. Chris Hemsworth, of course, is Thor himself. Tom Hiddleston is so wonderful in it. I'll bet you'd love him. Have you seen him? Did you see him do Hamlet recently on stage here?
I didn't. I've worked with Tom, and
you have?
Yeah, he's extraordinary.
Oh, he's
yeah.
extraordinary! What an impersonator! What an impressionist! You know, he's very, very gifted. And of course, who else? Rachel House, who's done several of Taika's movies before, and who am I forgetting? And what a cast! Did I mention everybody?
Well,
then Taika Waititi, who directed it. Do you know him?
Well, I know of his work.
Oh my golly. I adore him, and I think he's responsible for this being such a funny movie. It's so soulful, kind of. I was on the edge of my seat and laughing throughout, but then got choked up with it. I thought it was lovely.
Well, you've introduced a number of interesting names and people. I'd like to get back to them in a second. But in terms of the Thor Ragnarok, can you explain? Because I don't want people to think that's just his surname. He's Mr. and Mrs. Ragnarok's son. But so Thor. Ragnarok. Could you explain what Ragnarok is?
Ragnarok is, I think, the term from Norse mythology whereby, what is it? It's the end of everything. The end of everything. And that's what he's facing in this movie. Isn't that the plot where his planet and I don't want to give anything away, but Kate Blanchett's powerful character is threatening to destroy his home planet and I think a lot of other places too. So it's the end of everything.
End of everything.
Ragnarok. I think if I got that right. Yeah.
I think that's right.
Something like that.
I mean, we'd probably use that in daily usage from now on. How's your day? It's a little Ragnarok.
It's a little end of doomed. Let's see. Yeah.
How was your omelet? Ragnarok.
Ragnarok. Oh, Jesus. Just the end of humanity as we know it. Yeah. You ever see a movie and say, how'd you like that movie?
Yeah.
The end of humanity as we know it.
So going back to the Grandmaster, how you mentioned that, he was very big in the comic books. I think this is the first time we've seen him in the Marvel movies.
I think so, yeah.
Except for a small bit at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy.
You noticed
if I recall.
Yes, that's right. They put me. We had. We improvised a lot of this movie. That's what the great Taika Waititi had us do. And so I played piano like I do in real life a little bit. He had me do that, and we made up a lot of stuff. And I sang in it, but during one sequence, he said, here, just keep the camera rolling, and I'll dance and do whatever I do. So I just copied his dancing and did some dances, and they put a little snippet of me dancing during the end of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. You've set up a menu here. I feel like I've now got to just go back to things because you've introduced so many interesting things. Okay, let's go back to just the setup in case people don't know with this particular Thor film is that it kind of leads on from, I guess, the last Avengers film. Thor is out on his own in the galaxy trying to kind of save people and save things and a bit of a loner and then is called back. To kind of deal with Hela, who's played by Kate Blanchett, amongst other people, and then falls into your planet of
Sakaar. Sakaar.
Close but no Sakaar.
But no Sakaar. Did you just think of that now?
I'm winging it.
I like. Do you like puns?
Yeah.
Some say they're the lowest form of humor, but I think they're
Puntastic.
They can be puntastic. Listen to you. You're on fire.
Okay. Can I just ask you about Taika? Because mainly his background, people may know his background is connected with comedy, with Flight of the Conchords and with What We Do in the Shadows.
I love that all-improvised movie.
See me. He can't
he's
see
in
me.
it, and Taika's in it, and he's hilarious in that movie and in this movie. He's a wonderful actor, yeah.
What difference does it make to have somebody directing you who is an actor but also understands the nuance of comedy in the way that you do?
Yeah.
What sort of direction was he given? Was he giving?
Well, he's fantastic. I mean, and his particular sense of humor, which is all over this movie and everybody's performance and the choice of music and everything. And he's a painter. He is a painter and a photographer and a musician himself. So his artfulness is all over this. And as an actor, He's very sensitive as a director, being an actor, and he's a sensitive, sweet, generous, kind man anyway. But we would improvise, and he'd say, here's the script, which was a lovely document, but he'd say, do more of your own, do whatever you want. And I had ideas, and I'd do a lot of things. And they'd say, okay, keep the camera rolling. Here, say this. He would write on the spot and just sort of invent on the spot. And he'd say this. Here, Jeff, talk about this. And I liked that. He was very, very good and had great ideas. But his particular New Zealand kind of unique sense of humor is fantastic.
It's very dry, isn't it? It's a very dry sense of humor.
Dry, and you see him in the movie. He's hilarious in this movie, and all those Flight of the Conchords series. I thought that was great. It was kind of new to me. It was very kind of fresh feeling to me.
I read in one of your earlier interviews that you said you kind of crossed over for a day with Cate Blanchett, and you got to see her prepare.
Yeah.
Can you let on what her preparation?
I did a little bit. I don't want to give anything away, but
Sure.
With her part. But I'd had contact with her over the years because we did that Wes Anderson movie, Life Aquatic, and so I'd met her on that, and then I'd seen her on stage. She did a version of Streetcar Named Desire, where she played Blanche Dubois that I saw in Brooklyn. That was spectacular, and she was the best Blanche Dubois I'd ever seen, and I've seen a bunch of them, and I can imagine that Woody Allen must have seen that and thought, hey, I'm not going to remake this play, but I could write that same part, a version of that part, and put it in Blue Jasmine. And she's just fantastic. And then, no, I didn't have any scenes with her in this, but it happened that, and I was thrilled that I could overlap and come to the set to do something in preparation while she was finishing up her last day of filming. And so I saw her in this. It was great to see her anyway, and she's always so sweet. But seeing her act was really something, and she's so powerful in this movie, and alluring in a wonderful way, and funny herself, and vivid, and spectacular.
Can I ask you about your preparation? Do you have a routine before you start the day? Do you meditate? Do you play music? Do you kind of recite poetry?
I'm a kind of a craft geek. I've always wanted to be an actor in the worst way. I got to study with somebody really good, Sandy Meisner, in 1970, right after high school, and then went on to teach for a couple of decades. Something of his methods. So I was very interested in the nuts and bolts of it, and made an experiment of what you're talking about, a little bit, that aspect of it, and what you could best do to make yourself ready to do the best version of the scenes or the play or the moment. And over the years, I've experimented with a lot of different things in terms of preparation. My current thinking, although I don't have a formula, and each puzzle needs its own solution, I find, but these days I'm a little more self-trustful. I'm trying to get better as I go along. I'm lucky to have kept getting chances, I feel, and I feel like I'm on the threshold of doing some better things. And in my self-trustfulness now, I'm enjoying less what you're talking about. What do you call that? Kind of, preparation. I used to, I've done lots of things, and I'm nothing if not conscientious. When I get a part, I start working on it. I start working on a new movie in a couple of days, and I've been working on it every day in a certain way, and there are lots of different things. I have to, for instance, smoke a pipe in this. I've never smoked a pipe, so I've been working on that a little bit, and all kind of different things. Oh, I'm reading a good book that is not literally related to the movie, but thematically it is. And I think it's giving me, I'm really enjoying that. So, different solutions for different puzzles. But this business of, I used to go in with a lot of accoutrement and some books and music to read and things I felt I needed to get into some kind of condition, in a more energized condition, or a broken down, mushy, vulnerable, weepy condition. That always feels good to an actor, before you start. Or these days I don't do that. I come as is. I get a good night's sleep and I get some food. And I do like to play the piano. On this movie, I had a piano in my dressing room and I went through my routine, but that was just because I was going to play the piano in the movie and da-da-da. So more like that. What do you do? Because I'm interested in what other people do too. Well, what do you do?
Well, I kind of, music particularly, I think is a really useful way in. I think because it's a mood thing and I think that's kind of helpful. But also mainly I just kind of like ask people like you so I can gather some tips.
Well, I'm always gathering and trying to figure out how to do it myself. But I used to use music as kind of a I need to all the songs that really do something to me, and then I'd have like those sports guys you see. They come into the stadium with headphones on, and I used to have headphones because some songs make me cry or and I use them. Now I'm like, no. If something has done something to me before, I don't want to use anything that I have up my sleeve. Nothing like that. I kind of attend to the problem of the scene and give it some attention if something occurs to me in solving the thing. If a song, if some music or an idea occurs to me, I'll make use of that. But in the solving of the scene and what I need on the day, not so much, geez, I need to have, I used to run through a whole play before I would do my play. I did a run of a play where I did eight shows a week, but I'd be in the dressing room a couple hours before and do another whole play that I thought broke me down and stuff. I'm boring you with all this. This is inside baseball stuff, but I don't do any of that anymore, and I'm glad for it.
Let me just ask you one question, which is that as a piano player, as a jazz piano player, what theme, what song would you choose as the Grandmaster's theme?
Well, it might be different every day, and some, I don't know, like I say, but I like what Taika chose. I was surprised when I saw the movie because this was not in the script. He didn't, and nor did I'm not sure when he had it, but we didn't have it while I was shooting. My character is introduced, if you remember, and somebody's talking about you're about to meet the Grandmaster, and this song is playing from Willy Wonka. That song, "Come With Me," and we'll be in a world of pure imagination. That's pretty good. I mean, that's what the movie suggests is my intro song. That's pretty good.
And what will we see you in next?
So I've got a little part in Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom.
Just pause for the applause around the world. Thank you.
And I was thrilled to do that. And then I'm in the next Wes Anderson movie. I voice one of these dogs in Isle of Dogs, along with an amazing cast.
The Isle of Dogs is in London.
The Isle of Dogs is in London?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
It's an area in London called the Isle of Dogs.
I had no idea.
Okay.
What is it? What's the Isle of Dogs in London?
It's a bunch of buildings and shops.
Why do they call it the Isle of Dogs?
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe dogs ruled there once.
Really? Where is it? And is it an interesting part of town?
It's in the city of London, so
it's
near the city airport and the old part of the city of
Dogs.
London.
I'll be darned.
It's an actual place.
I wonder if I'm sure Wes knew about that, and I wonder if sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that Wes Anderson's film is about dogs.
It is.
I don't want people here thinking it's about this area of London, which is
I don't think it is.
Offices.
But maybe in his thing, I'm sure he knows everything. He's a grandmaster genius, And then I just did a movie with Jodie Foster called Hotel Artemis, and I'm about to start this thing called The Mountain with an interesting director named Rick Alverson, whose last movie was called Entertainment. Michael Cera was in it, and John C. Reilly. A very kind of some may think avant-garde, arty, kind of experimental, wonderful movie. So I'm excited about doing this.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Jeff Goldblum, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. You're so nice for doing this. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So that was Jeff Goldblum, who is wonderful to talk to, but impossible to interview because he just picks words from the ether, and then he just drops a couple of octaves, and you don't know where he's going next.
Was giggling the whole way through that interview.
He was absolutely wonderful. Actually, at the end, we posed for a picture, and he started to sing into my ear. And there's something truly magical about having Jeff Goldblum, his head attached to your head whilst he's singing.
Wow.
It was a religious moment. Yes. But there he was talking about Thor Ragnarok. So, Clarice, what did you make of Thor Ragnarok?
I feel like I should probably just warn everyone before I start this review that one of my favorite, if not my favorite director at the moment, is Taika Waititi.
Taika Waititi.
I'm probably going to keep saying it my way, but it's very good. Jeff Goldblum. So I am coming to this from, I guess, maybe a little bit of a biased perspective. But this is the third Thor film. So there have been 2 Thor films previously, Thor and Thor: The Dark World, and this does continue on directly from Thor: The Dark World, which I feel like I should bring everyone up to date because I feel like me, not everyone is closely following the events of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So at the end
does this not also come after Age of Ultron?
Yes.
And Spider-Man: Homecoming?
Yes.
And Civil War?
I feel like in terms of knowing, the film opens essentially where Thor: The Dark World ends, which is at the end of that film, you see Thor leaving Asgard, and then you see on the throne, it's not Odin, it's actually been Loki this whole time, and Odin has disappeared somewhere far off. And with Loki on the throne of Asgard, he's not been doing such a great job, and that leaves the whole place very vulnerable to a new threat. Let's just say maybe the goddess of death, Hela, played by Cate Blanchett, who is just so fabulous, as always. And she has these incredible antler headdress thing going on, and she sort of magically takes it off and puts it on, and every time she puts it on, she rubs her hands down her hair and it just magically appears, and every time she did it I had a small tingle go through my body. Just quite incredible. And I think what is very noticeable, because I rewatched the 2 Thor films before seeing this, is that Thor Ragnarok is incredibly different from those. It very much belongs to the post-Guardians of the Galaxy Marvel Universe, where now the studio, they're getting a little bit more confident. They feel like they can have a little bit more fun with their films. And so here comes the hiring of Taika Waititi, which I feel like people will probably know him from What We Do in the Shadows, Hunt for the Wilder People. He also did Boy, Eagle vs. Shark, all incredible films, which you should see if you haven't seen them yet. I will personally recommend them. And I think, everyone talks about how Marvel films are funny now. So I think it's no great surprise that Thor Ragnarok is very, very funny. But what surprised me was that it's funny in a very Taika Waititi way. It feels so much like one of his films. And it's almost indistinguishable in the humor from What We Do in the Shadows, which is surprising to me. And especially because he said in interviews that he relied a lot on improvisation. Like, I think he said 10% of the film is improvised or something. That number might be wrong, which is surprising because, over in Star Wars land at the moment, you have Phil Lord and Christopher Miller who were directing the young Han Solo film. They were fired for improvisation. So, yeah, I think that's surprising. I guess it's the difference between where Marvel is creatively and where Star Wars is creatively. And I think possibly the funniest character of the film is Korg, who is played by Taika Waititi.
I thought he was absolutely inspired.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny that he made himself the scene stealer of the entire film. It's quite a cheeky move.
For those people who don't know, so Korg is this kind of, 7-8 feet high rock monster. He's a kind of monster made of rocks. And Taika said that he decided to base his voice on New Zealand bouncers, who are really big but have quite soft voices. And so he...
That's a good impression. That is good.
And that was just brilliant. I mean, I thought it was just... I mean, I could... As a setup for a Korg film, it was perfect. I'd watch a Korg film.
Yeah, and it was very clever because he was always there. Whenever stuff got a little bit too epic or serious or a little too Marvel-esque, he would just undercut it with a quick little line, and then everything would go back to being very Taika Waititi again. And I think, as well, I was surprised to see how much the characters of Thor and Loki had actually changed in this film, because they're completely different from any Marvel film you've seen before. I mean, and they've been changed to a very, I keep saying Taika Waititi-esque, which is the only way that I can describe this film. It's incredibly Taika Waititi-esque.
I heard an interview with him, with Taika, and one of the things he was saying was he was talking about New Zealand humour and what that is. And he said, like most of my films, he said it's 2 people talking about the mundanity of life. He said, it's the little things. And so this film is full of little two-handers, whether it's Thor and Hulk or Thor and Loki or the Grandmaster and Loki. I mean, there's lots of little scenes where two people are discussing the kind of minutiae of life. And a lot of the humour is culled from that, which I think sets it apart from the humour in a lot of the other Marvel films.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, so I also spoke to him in an interview about this, and the thing I've always picked up from his films is all of his characters, the humour comes from insecurity. And so, Thor usually is meant to be this embodiment of masculinity. He's strong and powerful and very serious. And I think in this film, it's him trying to live up to that image the entire way through, and he's obsessed with the idea that he's the strongest Avenger. Like, why? I'm the strongest Avenger. Why would I not be the strongest Avenger? I'm Thor. And I think that's what's particularly beautiful about this film, because it just brings this little touch of humanity to everything, especially. And I feel like I've been talking a lot about the boys at the moment, but I need to give a shout out as well to the women of this film. There's at least 3 prominent, incredibly well-written and layered women in this, which is very rare for Marvel movies, unfortunately.
Particularly Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie. I thought it was a fantastic introduction.
I'm in love with her now.
In fact, I mean, with those kind of characters, with Valkyrie and, obviously the Hulk we've had, Grandmaster, I could easily watch spin-off films with all of them. I thought they were just kind of layered enough to have that.
It's all about the characterization, which is so wonderful.
We've got a ton of correspondence about Thor, but just before I start, this is what I love about doing this show, and this is what I love about the audience. So this is Oliver who has sent us a message. This was based on the fact that I was explaining to Jeff Goldblum in the interview that there is a place called Isle of Dogs, which is the name of the next Wes Anderson film that he's involved in. This is from Oliver. Thank you, Oliver. Hi, Sanjeev. My Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable tells me that Isle of Dogs gets its name from a receptacle of the greyhounds of Edward III. Some say it is a corruption of the Isle of Ducks, and that is so called in ancient records from the number of wild fowl inhabiting the marshes. Check, please, which is a reference to something else. So that's fantastic. And getting on to some of the correspondence, this is from Michael, who says, my name is Michael, a colonial commoner from Down Under, and I've just come from a preview screening of Thor Ragnarok at the amazing Randwick Ritz in Sydney, Australia. The crowd was composed mostly of teenage boys and tertiary students from a nearby university, so sadly the screening was not quite code compliant. However, the movie did make up for it, as Thor Ragnarok was splendid. The humour for me was the strongest aspect of the film, a refreshing break from the MCU tone, but not too far off that it felt like Deadpool. The pacing was excellent, as it did not feel like a 2-hour movie. The weakest aspect of the film for me was Karl Urban, whose storyline was too thin and ultimately distracting and not sustainable. The movie could have used a woman's touch, I feel, because it did not pass the Bechdel test, which really is unfortunate in this day and age. Thank you, Michael.
Wow.
Clarice, did it pass the Bechdel test?
I assumed it did, but perhaps I've been wrong, because I have to say, previous Marvel films, I think, have done pretty poorly by women. I think it's been very difficult to find any amount of women that are interesting and layered. Even in Guardians of the Galaxy, where it was meant to be the fun film where everyone is fun, Gamora has to be the serious lady with the sword who's serious all the time. So I think what I particularly loved about this is that you had Valkyrie, who I think it was pitched to Tessa Thompson as being the Han Solo of this movie, which I absolutely love, because I grew up obsessed with Han Solo and Indiana Jones and all the Harrison Ford characters, but you never have that equivalent for women ever. And just to see that was, I don't know, it was kind of incredible for me.
Should we just remind people what the Bechdel test is? So it's having at least two female characters
who are named,
who talk to each other or have a conversation which does not involve it solely about men.
They're not talking about a male character.
Right. I thought that in this, Valkyrie and Hela have conversations that I don't remember them.
I'm surprised, because I thought, there are 3 big female characters in this, and they're in scenes together talking to each other, not the focus being the man. So Yeah, I'm surprised if that's true. I'm genuinely quite surprised.
Cool. Okay, and this is from Mohammed Al-Sawi, thank you, from Hayes, who says, as a massive comic book movie fan, I booked IMAX tickets opening night with a few friends at the amazing IMAX Cine Leicester Square. I've been keeping a close eye on this movie ever since the first trailer, which had me question whether it was just going to be a full-on joke fest. But as a big fan of director Taika Waititi, I still had hope. I expected to come out pretty disappointed and further losing my faith in the Marvel formula. As it goes, I really enjoyed myself, laughing hysterically at some points and giggling at others. I found the use of comedy in this movie very witty and fresh. The jokes didn't feel forced, and I left feeling pretty satisfied overall. Definitely the best Thor movie to date, although I wouldn't go as far as the person behind me praising it as the best movie he's seen in ages. This is from Gareth Heskett, who says, to review this as a plot-based film would be futile. There isn't one. But what it was one of those drunken nights out that you can't really remember, but you just know it was brilliant. Smashed any laugh test, and no thrown-together romance side story to take you off the ride. I had a blast. The only two downsides, not enough Goldblum, and poor Idris Elba still hasn't had anything to do worth putting his talent into. Loved it. Massive improvement on the last Thor outing, which was the worst Marvel movie to date, but not as good as the first one because Thor 1 had jokes and a plot. This is from, who's this from? Ewan, aged 28 years and very specifically 10 months. I write this having just come out of advanced Tuesday night screening of the Thor Ragnarok at Glasgow's World of Cine and can say without a shadow of doubt that it is the best Thor movie yet and is definitely the higher end of the Marvel film menagerie the studio has churned out so far. My only real niggle is that I do have to agree with some reviewers' comments that Cate Blanchett felt a little underused, which is a shame, as she certainly was one of the most well-rounded and fleshed-out Marvel villains. But that may be, just stands out because, with the exception of Loki, villains have been the MCU's major weak point until very recently. Great soundtrack as well, clearly inspired somewhat by Guardians of the Galaxy's jukebox success. Sorry, it said GOTGs, and I got momentarily confused. Thank you.
Oh, that's for the hardcore Marvel fans. GOTG Volume 2.
Everyone's doing that these days. We might come back to more Thor Ragnarok reviews in the podcast extra, but another new film out this week is Breathe. The two stars of Breathe, Claire Foy and Andrew Garfield, were on the show a couple of weeks ago, but the film is out today. Take it away, Clarice.
Now, this is the directorial debut of Andy Serkis. It was going to be the Jungle Book film that he was making, but because the Disney one was such a smash success, they kind of delayed it a little bit. So this is actually his first film out as a director. Andrew Garfield plays Robin Cavendish. He's actually a fascinating character in history. He contracted polio at age 28 and became paralyzed from the neck down, needing a mechanical respirator to live, which in those days, which was around the mid-20th century, essentially meant you were bedridden for your entire life. But what Cavendish did, which was so incredible, is that he was not only a huge campaigner for disability rights, but he also just fought really hard for the sense of dignity, that everyone has the right to their own dignity and to their freedom. And so he helped to invent a new kind of wheelchair with a mechanical respirator actually built in so that him and others in a similar situation would have a freedom of movement. And so you can hear them discuss this respirator for the first time here in this clip.
Dr. Carton, Robin and I, we wanted to ask you a question, didn't we, Robin?
Can you do that again?
Can machines like that ventilator only work in hospitals?
Can you do that again?
Well, it's just a machine, you know. You plug it in and it goes. Why do you ask?
Robin's going to leave the hospital.
Do you have any idea of the risks?
Yes. Yes, I do. The risk is that he might die. Robin.
I either go on living here or leave here and possibly die.
Yes.
What are we waiting for?
So, as you can hear in that clip, there is also Claire Foy, who plays his wife, Diana. And obviously, when they're on the show, and also Andy Serkis spoke about the film when he was on the show for War of the Planet of the Apes, and you can really hear the passion in their voice, that they really believed in this story. And they wanted to tell this beautiful love story about these two people who supported each other through everything. And
that movie does sound very good, by the way. But the recorded video is just kind of interesting way of doing this. So, The whole screen goes to the background color when you create video, so let's see if it does it. Yeah. Still here. The screen is should be ending very soon. So the cool thing about when you press the play button, the whole controller actually shakes a little bit, along with the movement of each tick. So that was 114 frames it just recorded. And you'll feel each little increment as it plays through. Like if I do it right now, I can actually feel it play all the way through. So yeah, that's what the video should look like when it comes out. And what I want to do, this is really meant to be just a test, but geez, I kind of went a little bit more, went further within it than I thought I would, to be honest. A little too skewed, the angle's a bit, but for now, that's good as a test. Alright folks, thanks for tuning in, whoever did tune in, and I'm sorry about my little gaffe earlier with the window. Take care everyone.